Okay, so we're going to get into the line tool today, and we're going to use it to specifically trace some logos out. But before we do that, I just want to do a little bit of a rehash of how to actually create a line and how to manipulate that line. So in order to create a line, first we're going to go into the Create tab. We're going to then go into one button from the right of the Geometry tab to the Shapes tab, and then we're going to go into the Line Creation tab. All right, this guy is lit up in blue. That means I'm in line creation mode. So wherever I click, it's going to drop a vertex. And then if I drop two vertices, it's going to draw a line segment between those verts. Okay? So I'm going to just go ahead and click around. If I close it by clicking my last vertex on the first vertex I created, it'll give me the option of closing the spline or not closing the spline. I chose to close mine this time. All right? I'm going to delete that one and I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to go into line mode. And I'm going to draw here. If I ever don't like a point that I just dropped, I'm going to hit the backspace key, which is going to take me back. It doesn't go any farther than your first vertex you dropped. So backspace is how you kind of get back. If you don't like what you did, you can just back it on up. All right. We can also make the line have a Bezier handle or attenuation. And I do that by clicking and holding down the left mouse button. And that gives me access to this Bezier control, where I can kind of curve the line so it's not so straight anymore. All right, so I'm going to come in here and okay, I'm going to close that up. Now the cool thing about the line tool is after you've created a line, you can, in Max as usual, you can always edit your object after you've created it. And you can do that by selecting the object first, going into the modifier tab, and then going to the line itself. All right, so every object in Max is usually made up with some hierarchy of some sort. In this case, I have the line, which is the top of my chain. If I expand that chain by clicking on this little plus button here to the left, I can see the sub-objects that are available to me to modify underneath that line. So I have vertex, I have segments, and I have splines. If you'll notice, I also have a GUI button to go to those same sub-object components by clicking on the graphical interface icons for the same sub-objects. All right, so vertex, spline, vertex segment, and spline. Okay, a vertex is basically just a point. So it's a single point in space. A segment is a line that draws between two vertices. Okay, so we have segment, 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 and you'll notice that each segment is between two verts. And then we have the spline, which is essentially the entire curve. Okay? All right, so that's the line. If you want to edit the attenuation of the lines, you can select the vertex, right-click on it, and you have the following options. You have Bezier Corner. Okay? Bezier Corner is a Bezier handle where you can actually, if I hit the W key, I can move the handles independently of each other. So it's primarily used to put sharp corners on things, so I can bring that to a point. If I right-click this one, I'm going to convert this one to, it's already a Bezier, so I'm going to leave it as a Bezier. Bezier is where the handles are actually tied to each other, so they kind of mirror what the other handle is doing, and they're not broken, so you can't modify one in relation to the other. All right, I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to go into corner mode. Select this one. I've been noticing that in Max 2014 it's a little finicky. Sometimes it's not letting me, even though I changed the attenuation. I have to do it a couple times. It's kind of annoying. And others have been experiencing that same thing. So I think the splines are a little buggy in terms of changing the attenuation. So you just want to watch that. If you change the attenuation and it doesn't go to what you wanted, you may have to just deselect it, select it, and then do it again. All right. So a corner is basically a vertex with no attenuation. So there's going to be no mathematical formula to smooth that curve out. It's just going to be a straight line into a straight line. All right. And then finally, I'll come over to this one, skip that one. We have smooth, and smooth is kind of lame. It's just going to automatically smooth this based on an algorithm that you have no control over. Okay, so you will see me occasionally use this, but rarely, very rarely. So I'm going to recommend that you guys are always going to either use Bezier Corner, Bezier, or Corner. Okay. All right, awesome. That is the spline creation. Now let's actually do something with it. So I'm going to select my line and I'm going to delete it. And what I need to do is I need to bring in some reference art. All right. So in this exercise, we're going to create a simple logo. And we're going to do that by bringing in the Batman logo. Now, the reason I'm re-recording this video is because they were friendly to me at Autodesk. And for 2014, they changed the viewport background button. So before, you used to just be able to go to, where is it, Views, Viewport Background, Configure Viewport Background, or Alt-B. And it would bring up this dialog, and you could say Use Files, and you could, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to show you why it's broken and why it's not friendly for this setup. So you go to Use Files, we say Match Bitmap, and then I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my image that I want to use, which is on the desktop in my Ref Logos folder. I'm going to grab the Batman logo. I'm going to say OK. Awesome. It's going to bring that logo in to my background. But if you'll notice, I'm zooming the view, and the logo is staying static. Now that presents a problem because I want to be able to trace this logo and have it remain the same size. And right now, if I can zoom and the logo is not zooming with the 3D view, that's a big problem. And that used to be a button in here called Lock, I think it was called Lock Viewport Pan or something like that. And they took the damn button out. All right, so because of that, I have to re-record this lecture. So I'm going to get rid of that image, all I have to do is hit Alt-B and then go in here to this dialog and just say remove, and I can remove the background. And what I want to do is I'm just going to reset my scene real fast. And I want to show you a new way to do this now that they changed the software for us. And that is I'm going to go into the Create Standard Primitives, and I'm going to use a plane. I'm going to turn on my 3D snaps for a second because I want to snap to the origin here. I'm going to use my top orthographic viewport so that I make sure that my plane is being created right there at the center of the world. And then size-wise, I'm going to make it kind of just 1 unit under my perspective grid. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to create it, and I'm making it 1 unit under the size of my perspective grid. That's kind of a good size to generally build stuff at, is just use that perspective grid to fill it up. Okay. Now that I've done that, I actually have to assign my logo texture map onto this object. So those of you guys who are dying to get into texture mapping, you're going to be excited right now because I'm going to go out here to the desktop and I'm going to grab that Batman logo and I'm just going to drag it right onto my plane, and bam, it's going to texture map perfectly to the plane. All right, the downside to this though is that my image was not completely square. And so I actually have to undistort my plane so that the image isn't distorted anymore. So I'm going to do that first, okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to be able to see this image in my top ortho. And so in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the F3 key, which is going to show my texture in that view. And then what I want to do is I want to set this thing up so that I don't accidentally modify this plane. I want to freeze it, all right? So in 3ds Max, you can just right-click on an object and say Freeze Selection, and what that's going to do is it's kind of make it so it's not editable. But the downside to that is it got rid of my texture map, okay? Well, that sucks. So I need to unfreeze it. So I'm going to say Unfreeze All, and I want to just click a box so that it renders with the texture map even though it's frozen. And I'm going to do that by selecting the object first. I'm going to right-click on it, and I want to go to the properties. So we have object properties right there. So again, that was select the object, right click on it, go to object properties, and then it's going to open up the object properties dialog. And I want to click on this little button over here, which says, where is it? There we go, to the left, right there. Show frozen in gray. What that means is it's going to remove my texture map once I freeze it. So if I don't want it to remove the texture map, I have to unclick that and say OK. All right. Now that I've done that, I can click on the object and right-click on it and say Freeze Selection, and bingo, bango, boom. Now it zooms with the viewport, and it's not editable, which is what viewport background used to do before they got rid of the Lock Pan Zoom button That one button caused all this. All right, so now I got my background art, it's locked, and now I want to trace it. So the grid is in my view. Hold on one second. All right, so now that I got my background image set up, and I'm going to do this in my top ortho, and I know I'm in a top ortho because it says top right there. I'm going to hide the grid, which is kind of in my way. I'm going to maximize my top ortho. And what I want to do is I'm going to create the components of this logo. The first is kind of this shape right here, which is elliptical. So I'm going to come over here into my Create tab. I'm going to go into my shapes. So Create, Shapes. And I'm going to create an ellipse. And the way the ellipse tool works is if I just click in the top left and drag down, I can kind of make it so it's about the same size as my yellow border there. That's what I'm trying to do, is build that yellow background. And then I'm going to kind of move it. So I just hit the W key and moved it into position to line up with the logo. Once I've done that, that's actually pretty good. I'm going to just move that off to the side for a second. And now I'm going to trace the interior of the logo. Now the beauty of this logo is that it makes my life easy because it is symmetrical, which means I can draw a line straight down the center of that object, and from left to right it is identical. So that means that I get a time savings because I'm only going to have to draw one side of this, and then I'm going to be able to mirror it to get the other side. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to use my line tool. I'm going to come into the line, and I'm going to drop it here. So I'm clicking, clicking. Now I have a curve. So that first one I just clicked to make a line and get a straight line between. Now that I have a curve, I'm going to left click and hold down so that I can get that curve shape for the ear there. And then I'm going to come down here again. I'm going to come over here. Whenever you have a curve like this, that's kind of a hemisphere. And what I mean by that, or half a circle, you want to, at a minimum, you want to break your object down in terms of shapes. So this is kind of half of a circle right there, that shape. And so I'm going to need a minimum of 3 vertices in order to draw that well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop one vertex here. I already have one there. This is number 2. And then finally, here's number 3. And see how I can get that shape nicely. This is going to start running away on me a little bit, and that's just a limitation of the 3ds Max line tool, where it once you start attenuating it, it keeps it going. And so I'm just going to leave this off into limbo land right now, and I'm going to come back and edit it. All right, so again, I'm looking at this shape over here, and that's kind of half of a circle, that entire shape there of the wing. So I'm going to need a minimum of 3 vertices to draw that line as well. I got 1 there, 2, finally 3. Okay, looking at this shape again, that's another half circle, so I need 1, 2, 3. Okay, again, another almost a half a circle. Actually, if you just drew it right there, that's a half circle. So I need 1, 2, and then I'm going to cheat. I can actually get away with this. I'm going to do 3. You can see though that it's making it a little bit harder for me to get that shape. Whereas if I would have come in here and just dropped one more vertex right there, I would have a much easier time to do that. So that's just something to be mindful of, okay? Cool, now my shape's done. I want to edit the line after I've created it. So I'm gonna, whoops, I thought I froze you. I'm gonna freeze this guy, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna edit the line. So I'm gonna right click on it, and I'm gonna come over here into the modifier stack. I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I just have a few of these vertices I want to clean up, specifically this one. So this one, if I want a corner here at the corner of the ear, the best tangent for me to use is Bezier Corner. So I'm going to come in here. There we go. Awesome. I have a beautiful tangent there. Nice corner, hard corner there. This one actually looks okay. I want to make sure that it's not self-intersecting. If you see here, look at that. That line actually doubles back on itself. That creates problems. So what I want to do is I want to flip this guy around so that it's no longer self-intersecting. And then because that comes to a point, I'm also going to use a Bezier corner on that one. So I'm going to come in here. And Bezier corner just allows you to manipulate the handles independently of each other and come to a nice point there without having the line cross over itself. Okay, this one I'm going to leave as a Bezier, and I'm just going to edit it to fit that shape. I'm going to come over here. This one should definitely be a Bezier corner. This one is a Bezier. I'm going to kind of edit that a little bit to get a little bit better. Okay, same deal on this guy. I'm going to edit it just a little bit. And then finally, this one can just be a corner because it's just a hard edge. Although it's starting to give me a weird shape there, so I'm going to turn it back to a Bezier corner so that I can get just a little bit of attenuated shape on that one. All right, awesome. So I'm almost done with this guy. Now all I need to do in order to make this thing full is I'm going to first go into spline mode, which is going to select my entire line. And then I'm going to come over here into the modifier tab. So modifier tab again is the thing that looks like the noodle. And then what I like to do is I like to actually hover my cursor over the border here of the perspective view. And you get this little double arrow thing. And that means that you can actually drag this out to show all the other attributes that are under there, rather than doing this. So this is what most people do. You sit here and scroll down the list. I hate that. And so what I always usually like to do is just pull this thing out so I can see everything available to me. All right. So again, I'm in spline mode, and I'm looking for a button by the name of mirror. There it is. So I'm in the tools that are available to me under the spline subobject mode. If you'll notice, when I switch between segment and vertex, the tools over here are changing. So I'm in vertex, I switch to segment, I get some new options. If I go to spline, I get some different options as well. So if you're in here and you're hunting for mirror and you're going, why can't I mirror this? Why can't I mirror it? You're probably in the wrong mode, all right? It's very specific. You gotta be in spline mode or else that mirror button gets grayed out. All right, so now I'm gonna select my spline and I'm gonna say mirror. And I also have to make sure that I click on copy before I do that, or else it's just gonna take my object and mirror it, make a mirror version of itself, which is not what I wanted. So I have to select it. I wanna make sure I turn on copy, and then I'm gonna say mirror. And now it's going to take the spline that I already created and make a new version of it here on the other side. Awesome, I'm gonna position it in space. Okay, now what happens here is if I'm in spline mode, and if I select this spline and then this spline, you can see here that I have two separate spline curves. If I want to make this all one, what I need to do is I actually need to merge these vertices here in the middle. Because right now if I zoom in on this, I got two verts there in the middle that are overlapping. And if I go into the bottom, I got two verts that are overlapping. So to make this all one spline object, I'm going to have to select those vertices, and I'm going to have to use this tool over here, which is called Weld. And all Weld is going to do is it's going to say, if these two vertices are greater than a certain distance from each other or less than, I'm going to go ahead and make those into one. So what I like to do is, right now it's set to 0.1. And so if I go in here and select these guys and I hit Weld, nothing's happening. And that's because those two verts are farther apart than 0.1. So if I want this to weld these kind of no matter what, I call this the fire hose approach. I'm going to just type in a very high value like a 100. And then I want to make sure that I only select those two verts. And now I'm going to say weld. Boom, there they go. They become one. Now, there's a problem with the fire hose approach using the weld tool, and that's this. If I'm not careful and I accidentally select a bunch of vertices and I click on weld, oh shit, I just combined all of those into one. So you just have to be very careful if you're going to use the fire hose approach that you only select the two vertices you want to weld. All right, and now I'm going to say weld, bingo, bango, boom. It's welded, awesome. I'm going to move my border back in, kick ass, okay. And then now I'm going to pop over to the perspective viewport, and it doesn't really look like it's doing anything. All right, I'm going to say unfreeze all so that I want to hide this guy. So now I'm going to select my background image, plane, and I'm going to say hide selection. And then now I can see the shapes that I just created. That's my Batman logo. I'm going to first select the background, and I'm going to go into the modifier tab. I'm looking for a modifier by the name of Extrude. So I'm going to hit the E key, which is going to take me right to the E's in the modifier list. And I'm going to add an extrude. Cool. It filled it in. All right. But it's still kind of flat. And that means I just have to give it a thickness. So by default, we have the ellipse, which is what I used to create. That was the shape I had. And then we have the extrude, which is the modifier I added above it. Okay, so now that I have the extrude, I actually have to give it a depth. And you can do that by going into the amount tab. So I'm going to change the amount to something. Actually, I kind of like 4, so I'm going to leave it at 4. And then we can increase the number of segments. That doesn't really get us anything there, so I'm going to leave that alone. If I want to increase the number of segments around here, I actually have to go into the ellipse that I used to create it, and I have to go into the interpolation settings and increase the number of steps. So a good number for interpolation steps is probably 32 if I want it to be very smooth. Awesome. Now I go back up to the extrude. Cool. Now I'm going to say hide selection. There we go. I don't know why it took forever to do that. I'm going to unhide all because for some reason I'm going to select my background plane and my extrude, and I'm going to say hide selection. There we go. Now I want to do the exact same thing to my Batman logo. So I'm going to grab the bat there, and I'm going to go into the modifier list, and I'm going to hit the E for extrude, and boom, there we go. It's going to remember the exact same settings I just had before. And now if I say unhide all, and I'm going to hide my background image, hide selection, I can select my bat and pull it up. Okay, I can select my background. I'm going to change that to black. And then I'm going to change my foreground to kind of that gold Batman color. And there we go. And if I'm feeling fancy, I'll make it Batgirl. All right. So it's that simple. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do that again. I'm going to pause the video. We're going to do it again slow here. Well, it happens every time. All right, so I was waiting for this to happen. One of you guys was building your logo, and you went to extrude the bat logo. I'll just hide the background here. So I'm going to say hide selection. I'm going to select my bat logo here. And I'm going to turn off the end result for a second. And I'm going to go down here into the line itself, into the sub-object. I'm going to go into the vertex mode. I'm going to grab one of my corners here, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to pull the line so that it crosses over itself. Okay? So we can see that this line is now self-intersecting. All right? Now watch what happens. I go back up to the line and go back up to the extrude, and I turn on the light bulb to show the extrude and check it out. Now my bat is hollow. Okay? So this isn't the only thing that will make your object hollow sometimes. This is just one of them. One of them is self-intersection. So that's where your line crosses over itself. So just to prove that, I'm going to go back down into the vertex level. And I'm going to uncross it. And check it out. The moment I do that, it's thick again. So it can fill it in. There's another thing, though, that can make it so that it doesn't fill in. And that's if you have unwelded vertices. So those are the two things. So if that ever happens to you, what you have to do is you have to just go into your line and start in the, I usually just start at like kind of the top vertex here. And I'm just going to zoom in and I'm just going to select all the vertices and I'm going to look at them all and make sure they're not self-intersecting. Sometimes you go and you look around the entire thing and you still can't find it. And this is what I refer to sometimes as 3D Studio S Max Voodoo, where it's showing in the graphics card that they're not intersecting, but Max thinks they are. So this is the nuclear option. If that happens to you, you can select all of the vertices, right-click, and convert them to corners. And then that will 90% of the time fix it. But then the downside to that is you'll have to go re-attenuate afterward. We're going to get into that. The next logo we're going to do is a lot harder. It's the Mortal Kombat logo. So we're going to run into a lot more problems than just this.
I just have a quick question off of it.
Okay, guys, now that we've mastered the Batman logo, we're going to graduate to the MK logo. So I'm going to do this one really fast. So again, you don't have to follow along. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to rip through it so fast, so I'm going to make your head spin. So I'm going to first reset my scene. So I get completely new everything. I'm going to go through the exact same process as before. I'm going to create a plane. I'm going to always snap it to the origin so that my logo is going to be centered. I usually make it square. If I'm doing these professionally, I will also always make sure that my reference art is square. In this case, I didn't do that because I want you guys to be able to figure it out on your own or know when it's not square and you need to fix it. So the MK logo actually is square. So this time when I go ahead and just drag it, be careful not to drag it into, some of you guys were dragging it into your orthographic viewports and letting go of it. In this case, when you drag it, you want to drag it into your perspective viewport and make sure that it lands on top of your object. So I'm waiting until that plus key shows up right there on my object, and then I'm going to let go. And that's going to texture map that image to my object, rather than if you were dragging it in to your viewport, what was happening is it was creating a viewport background. And if you'll remember, the reason I'm showing you this different way and recording a new video is because they actually broke that for us. So if I accidentally do that, all I have to do is select the active view, and I'm going to hit Alt-B, which brings up the viewport background dialog, and I'm going to say remove to get rid of it, and there we go. Okay? So in this case, I'm just going to texture map an image onto a plane. And then I want to right-click on this plane, and I'm going to go to, again, same deal, Object Properties, and I want to untoggle Show Frozen in Gray. And all that I'm doing there is I just want to make it so that I can actually freeze this object. So I'm going to select it and say, before I do that, that Mortal Kombat logo is not exactly square. So I'm going to undistort this just a wee bit, okay, to get a little bit more circular. And then I'm going to right-click on it and say Freeze Selection. And freezing it just makes it so I can't edit it, which means it can't get in my way. Okay, for the MK logo, it's a little bit more complicated. We have a border around here, and I'm going to do that border by creating a shape. So I'm going to go to Create, Shapes, and I'm going to do a circle. And if I turn on my grid, this is actually going to help me. I'm going to snap it so that it's to the grid. And then I need another border, another circle, in order to complete this border. And rather than me draw another one, I'm just going to select the circle, and I'm going to hit R for scale, hold down the Shift key, and just make a copy. And there we go. I got my border images, or my border shapes. Turn off my snaps. Pull those off to the side again so they don't get in my way. And there's my border object. Okay. Now I want to start drawing the shape of this, which is the dragon. So I've created the border, which is the external shape, and now I need the shape for the inside, which is the dragon. So I'm kind of like doing this similar to like Photoshop layers. This is a little bit, it's just like a Photoshop layer in 3D, all right? So I'm kind of reducing everything to a layer. So I'm going to hit the G key to hide the grid again. And now this one is a little bit more daunting, right? All sorts of crap. I'm going to just go ahead and do it really fast. I'm going to go into Create, Shapes, Line Tool. I'm going to start back here on the tail, come in. I'm just going to kind of go as fast as I can. I'm mentally in my head. I'll just start saying it out loud until I get sick of it. I'm kind of breaking this down in terms of degrees of arc. So I've got basically from here to here, that's almost flat, so I'm going to leave that one alone. There's maybe a little bit of arc. This one from here to here is kind of greater than no arc, so I'm going to add 3. So same deal in here. This one's kind of a hemisphere. So I'm going to come over here. I got 1, 2, 3 for that. This one also, I can actually cheat and get away with 2 there. Come over here. Okay, this is about 180 degrees of arc. So I'm going to come in here and drop. That's my 1, 2, 3. All right. Same deal here. This is about 180 degrees of arc. So I got 1, 2, 3. Okay. And here, about 180 degrees of arc. So I got 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is almost flat. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop that down. This here, it's more than 0 degrees of arc, so I'm going to drop 3 verts there also. Okay, same deal here. We got 1, 2, 3. Same deal here. We got 1, 2, 3. And then here's where I'm just going to go ballistic and start flying, because now I've done the explaining, and now I'm just going to get it done. In these tight corners, it's really a good idea to drop 3. Very, very tight corners. Let's see. I'm going to do 3 up here too. Some of you guys will analyze me and be like, he broke his rule. And I'll be like, it's kind of a guideline. It won't lead you wrong. But it's also not set in stone. Okay, I'm actually doing this very fast because I know that at a later date, which is basically the moment I'm done with this, I'm going to be able to come back in here and edit this. So I'm not being ridiculously pretty with the way that I'm drawing this right now. That one, I just noticed that's kind of a subtle point there at the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and... Modeling is really attention to detail. That's all it is. Now I'm getting really lazy and I'm just dropping. You can do this though. This is why I'm doing it this way. I'm showing you a number of different techniques. So I was doing attenuation. I got a little bit sick of that. It wasn't going fast enough. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start dropping points. I'm not throwing my rule away, right? I'm going 3 points for every 90 degrees of arc. 3 points at the tips as well of things are going to give you a much cleaner result. So 3 points also in the corners like that. That's going to give you a much cleaner. 1, 2, 3. The other thing about dropping 3 at the corners is it's going to keep those from self-intersecting and causing you a lot of headaches later.
Did you choose this image because we have to go inside like the eye and the nose and everything too?
I chose this image because the person who taught this class before me used it. Yeah. All right, so there's the outline of the dragon. Now, if I want these interior shapes, what I need to do is I need to draw these as separate lines. So I'm going to go again, I'm in the line creation tool, and the way it works is if ever you have a cutout for an object, you simply draw the shape on the inside. Okay. And then what you need to do is, in order to make it so these holes actually get cut out of your shape when you extrude it, you have to select the line. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. What I need to do is I need to combine them. So I'm going to select my outside shape. I'm going to go into the modifier stack. I'm going to go to attach, and I need to attach now all my interior shapes. So I'm going to attach the eye. I'm going to attach the nose. I'm going to attach this little thing, which I think is just like a highlight or something. And then I'm going to attach the mouth shape. All right. Now that all my interior shapes are attached, I'm going to right click to get out of attach mode. And then now I can actually go into my perspective viewport, select my line, and I'm going to add the extrude modifier. So I'm going to say extrude. Awesome. It actually worked. Now you might say to yourself, man, you were really loose with that and you were really fast. And I'm saying, hell yeah, this is a complicated logo. I'm going to go ahead and draw it out very simple first to get everything working, right? Because if you draw this out and you attenuate all the lines and you get in there and you meticulously, painstakingly get the shape perfect, and then you go and hit extrude and the thing's hollow, what are you going to do? Oh, shit. I just spent way too much time on that. So I recommend that you cram it out really fast, get it all working, then go back down into the modifier stack, to the line, to the vertex, and attenuate all the lines, knowing full well that it's all working all the way up the stack. This is called 12 years of production experience and knowing how to get things done very fast and at a high level. All right, so if you don't work that way, that's cool. You know, disregard. All right, so same deal on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and select my circle. I need to attach the other circle so that I can get a border on that. But before I do that, I actually want to make a copy of this interior circle. And I'll explain that here in 1 second. So I'm going to hit the R key, hold down the shift key, and I'm just going to make that one a little bit bigger than the other one. And I'm going to say OK. And then now I'm going to select the two that I wanted as my border shape right there. And actually, it's not going to let me, if I go to the modifier stack, there's no attach, if you'll notice. I'm over here, there's no attach. Oh, crap. Am I screwed? No. It means I just have to select one of these guys. So I'll select the exterior circle and right-click on it and convert it to an editable spline. And watch what happens. It's going to go from circle to editable spline. Boom, editable spline. Now it's got all these other options. So under the editable spline, it also has an attach mode. So I can now attach that second circle, and now they're all one curve. And so now I can confirm that by going to spline mode, and if I select it, you can see here that those are actually the same object. I'm going to go back out to the object, so all the way up the chain to the editable spline, and then now I'm going to add an extrude modifier. So I'm going into the modifier, I'm hitting the E key for extrude, and there we go. There's our border. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and put that in position. I'm going to maybe extrude it a little bit higher than the dragon, so the dragon kind of insets in there. And then I'm going to change the color to black. Okay. And then now if I hide my original logo, so I'm going to say unfreeze all, and I'm going to hide this background image. We can see here that this background is hollow, and that's why I created this extra circle here. So what I want to do is I just want to make a plane that I can basically put in there to give the dragon a background. So again, this is just like Photoshop, but in 3D. We have our border layer, we have our background layer, and then we have our dragon layer. All right, so I'm going to select my background layer, and I need to add an extrude modifier to it. And this one I'm going to give it a very low value because I don't want it to have a whole bunch of thickness. I'm going to just give this one like a 0.1 or something, or a 0.2. There we go. And then now I can move this guy into position. If I want to precision place it, I'm going to go into my top orthographic view and get that thing centered up as much as possible. That looks pretty good. Okay, and then now I'm going to change its color to red. I'm going to change my dragon here to gold. And there we go. We got the MK logo. Now if I want to make everything so it's not so faceted, I'm going to first go into the object itself, and I'm going to go down into the editable spline. I'm going to click on Interpolation. I want to change that to 32. Awesome. I'm going to then select this one. The background doesn't need it. It's all hidden. So I don't need to add any unnecessary geometry to that one. The dragon, what's going to happen if I go into the line and increase the interpolation right now? Nothing, because I have not tweaked the actual attenuation on the vertices. And so until I do that, there's really not going to be an end result. All right. So I recommend maybe selecting that line and going into the interpolation and maybe leaving it at 6 until you go back through and then edit all the vertices and then get it perfect. But that's essentially it. And so we're going to do this again here in class. And we're going to do it slow. But this video is going to be your reference for actually working at home. All right. So good luck with y'all, and we will see you guys next week.
That's not